I guess I never really lived until I turned 64. David, I said to myself that day, has he kept me all these years? What have I deprived myself of? I began to question myself. It was like a rebuke and an awakening. Bruce didn't say anything. He just watched me. His gaze was like he was supporting me. I slowly touched the dusty boxes with my hands, untied the old straps, and opened the boxes, and suddenly I came across a photo album. A photo of my youth came out of it. I would like to ask for help from everyone watching me. Would you subscribe to my channel for the courage to tell my stories? Thank you in advance. That young girl on the beach, holding a margarita in one hand, smiling in an orange bikini. Yes, it was me, Elizabeth, carefree, cheerful, enjoying life. As I looked at that photograph, I felt a warmth, a sadness inside me. Feelings that I had suppressed for many years suddenly surfaced. At that moment, I heard the basement door open, and I turned my head and saw Bruce, my step-grandson. The last time I had seen him was years ago, when he was 23 years old. Now he was 27. He smiled at me with a coffee cup in his hand. "When did you get here, Bruce?" I said, surprised. "I saw you coming into the basement," he said, smiling. "I had my car outside and I thought you needed help." I was about to protest, but Bruce was already inside, looking around. Suddenly, his eyes fell on the album in my hand. "What's this?" he asked. I didn't want to give it to him, but I froze. His eyes were locked on the beach photo in the album. After a long silence, he turned to me. Is that you?" he asked in surprise. "Yes," I said with a nervous laugh. "My wild years." Bruce's expression changed. It was both surprise and admiration. "Seeing you like this, it's strange but impressive," he said. Then he started looking at the album more carefully. At that moment, everything was very complicated. I was both filled with nostalgia and somehow shaken by Bruce's reaction. I would like to ask for a favor from all of you who are watching me. Please subscribe to my channel for the courage to tell my stories. "We should continue," I said, closing the album. But Bruce objected. "We need to analyze this more closely," he said jokingly. "It's amazing to see you like this." I hesitated, but under Bruce's curious gaze, I opened the album again. As I turned the pages, we moved from beach photos to my college years, nightclubs, friend parties, and that red dress. In one photo, I was dancing in a tight backless dress. Bruce lingered a little too long in that photo. His eyes were flicking back and forth between me and the photo. "Is that really you?" he asked, his voice full of wonder. "Yes," I said, a little embarrassed. "Just being young." Bruce was quiet at that moment. He had a different expression on his face. He took a deep breath, seemed to be gathering his words, then paused. Finally, he spoke, choosing his words carefully. "You were like my grandmother, but at the same time, you looked like a party girl." His words both embarrassed me and triggered something inside me. I thought that David had never looked at me like that. He had never admired me like that. David had always been distant, cold, and rigid. But Bruce, he was different. The look in his eyes told me more than anything else. "I'm going to ask for a favor from all of you who are watching me. Would you subscribe to my channel for the courage to tell my stories? Thank you in advance." We kept flipping through the photos in the album, and they were becoming more and more distinct. One was of me and my friends laughing and having fun in short shorts and bikini tops. Another was of me dancing in a nightclub in a backless black dress. Bruce smiled softly. "It's a privilege to see these," he said. "Even when you were young, your beauty was breathtaking. David was a lucky man indeed." His words both warmed me and made me feel something else, something deeper, more complex. Bruce's interest was both surprising me and somehow creating an attraction in me. I felt a connection between us. When we reached the last page, Bruce closed the album but didn't move. Without taking his eyes off me, he spoke in a low voice. "Elizabeth, you are truly extraordinary." These words touched me deeply. I hadn't had anyone look at me like that or say something like that for a very long time. Our eyes locked, and I felt how the air between us grew heavy, the atmosphere of the dusty basement suddenly warm. Bruce's presence was affecting me. It also made me feel young again. Bruce put the album back and turned to me. "Looking at those photographs," he said, with deep sincerity in his voice, "you haven't aged a day. You are still young and absolutely beautiful." These words took my breath away. Even in my youth, I was not used to hearing such a compliment, certainly not from David. My heart sped up for a moment. A wave of warm feeling spread through me. I smiled slightly. "Thank you, Bruce, but the truth is, I'm still old," I said, with some bitterness in my words. Bruce squinted his eyes at me. "You may be old, but you haven't lost your desires," he said confidently. These words both surprised and impressed me. Bruce's trusting gaze enveloped me completely. He was the kind of man I had dreamed of in my youth, confident, kind, and understanding. Finally, Bruce stood up, put his hands in his pockets, and looked at me again. "I'll put my bike in the garage," he said, a certainty in his voice. "But don't leave the basement, Elizabeth. Wait for me in the living room." I would like to ask for a favor from all of you who are watching me. Please subscribe to my channel for the courage to tell my stories. His voice and demeanor were somehow reassuring and authoritative. I agreed with a slight nod of my head. "Okay, Bruce," I said with a slight smile. Bruce went upstairs with quick steps. As I watched him go, I found myself lost in thought, questioning my feelings for him. Even his interest in his bike impressed me. I imagined what he would look like working on it, or the energy and passion with which he rode it. He was exactly the kind of man I had fantasized about when I was young. I mumbled to myself, "But he's my step-grandson." But despite this thought in my mind, I felt my heart being pulled in another direction. I went into the living room and waited, and soon Bruce returned with a bottle of wine. As soon as I looked at the bottle, I recognized it. It was my favorite wine, rosé. I couldn't understand how he knew or why he had brought it, but I felt a spark rekindle inside me. "I hope you like this," Bruce said with a slight smile. Surprised, I asked, "This is my favorite wine. How did you know that?" He shrugged his shoulders, a slight grin on his face. "I guess I remembered when I was young that I pay attention to the little things," he said. "I would like to ask for a favor from all of you who are watching me. Please subscribe to my channel for the courage to tell my stories." His words touched me deeply. "That's really very special and thoughtful of you," I said softly. Bruce opened the wine, poured it into 2 glasses, and handed one to me. "Let's share some good memories tonight, Elizabeth," he said. He raised his glass. As the unique flavor of the rosé danced on my tongue, I couldn't take my eyes off Bruce. As the conversation progressed, my interest in him came not only from his words, but also from his looks and actions. At one point, when our glasses were almost empty, Bruce's eyes once again locked with mine. There was a warmth in his gaze, something that drew me to him. I felt a shift begin inside me. It was full of both fear and excitement. Bruce paused, put his glass on the table, and turned towards me. His eyes were more intense, more determined. "Elizabeth," he said in a low voice, "I know I shouldn't be telling you this, but..." My breathing quickened. My heart was pounding in my chest. "Yes, Bruce?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Bruce slowly reached out his hand and gently touched my hand. The warmth, the movement of his fingers, created a wave of emotion inside me. "When I look at you, I can't stop myself," he said. "You're not just beautiful, you're mesmerizing." His words echoed somewhere inside me. "Bruce, I said, but stopped before I could finish my sentence. He hesitated for a moment, but then leaned in. The world stopped for a moment when his lips gently touched mine. His kiss was gentle, but at the same time, there was a suppressed passion in it. Feelings I'd suppressed for years suddenly came back. As Bruce's hand slid down to my waist, I surrendered myself completely to the moment. When his lips left mine, the tension between us was still in the air. My heart was beating wildly. I looked into his eyes. He was looking at me. We were expressing our feelings without words. Unable to ignore the urge inside me, I leaned in and kissed him again. This time the kiss was deeper, more passionate. Bruce pulled me to him gently but firmly. His touch created a warmth that spread throughout my body. Sitting side by side on the sofa, there was almost no space between us. Bruce's breath, his presence, everything filled the moment. As I leaned against his chest, I felt a stirring inside me. But this time, it wasn't fear or hesitation. It was something completely different. Surrender. I would like to ask for a favor from all of you who are watching me. Please subscribe to my channel for the courage to tell my stories. Thanks in advance. I slowly sat up, but I could still feel his warmth.